Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere distant, dense with incense smoke, whispering scrolls, and the ever-present possibility of imperial punishment. You'll wake up in a mud-brick courtyard home with the scent of old ash and steamed millet lingering in the air. The sun isn't up yet, but you are, because if you're not, someone with a whip might be. You live in imperial China now, and there are rules, so many rules. You stretch your limbs on a woven straw mat, stiff from sleep, your blanket thin and scratchy from constant washing. Cold drafts slide through the cracks in the wooden walls. There's no insulation, just hope. Chickens cluck from the other side of the courtyard wall, and the neighbor's pig is already squealing. You really should be up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment your location and local time. I want to know who's drifting into dreamland around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull on your rough hemp tunic and tie it with a fraying sash. The cloth has been reused, resewn, repurposed for years. If you're lucky, it's not infested with lice this week. You stumble outside, ducking through a low doorway into the open-air courtyard, where the family stove still smells like last night's fish bones. You're a commoner about 90% of the population, and you live in a Sanheyuan, a three-sided courtyard house shared with your extended family, who are already busy. Your uncle is muttering as he repairs a broken wooden yoke. Your aunt is bent over a vat of soybeans, stirring the mash that will ferment for weeks. Everyone has a job, and everyone notices if you slack off. The air is still. No birds yet. Just the sound of distant footfalls and the faint creak of cartwheels on dirt. Your first job? Sweep the yard. It's not symbolic, it's mandatory. Dust and leaves must be gone before sunrise. Sweep wrong, and the family might say you're inviting spirits in. Sweep too slowly, and you'll be blamed for your brother's failed marriage proposal. As your stiff broom of bundled reeds scrapes the stone, you remember what an elder once told you. Sweep north to south, and the ghosts stay calm. Sweep east to west, and you bring bad weather. Historians still argue whether such rituals were genuinely spiritual or just clever ways to enforce discipline. But you don't question it, you just keep sweeping. Then comes the water. You haul it from the well, 2 buckets dangling from a shoulder pole, sloshing against your legs. Water for washing, water for boiling, water that may or may not have tadpoles. You get bonus points if you don't spill any. And the smell. Ah yes, welcome to the layered fragrance of an imperial Chinese morning. Wood smoke, wet dirt, manure, and salted fish. Delicious. Just as the sky turns from ink to slate, the city drum tower begins to beat. Boom, boom. A sound so ancient it feels like time itself is waking up. Everyone in the village adjusts accordingly. Children dash to the schoolhouse, with bamboo books strapped to their backs. Merchants unlock creaky wooden stalls. You move toward the stove, where your mother ladles out breakfast. It's millet again. Always millet. But today, there's a treat. A sliver of pickled radish and half a boiled egg. She saved it for you because it's exam season. Yes, even though your father thinks you're too dreamy to pass, your mother still has hope you'll someday wear the scholar's robe. You shovel it down with chopsticks carved from leftover wood scraps. If you're truly unlucky, you might get a splinter in your lip. Again, as the warmth hits your belly, you glance at the sky. Overhead, a wisp of cloud coils like a dragon's tail. Omens matter here. That might mean good fortune or a flood. Someone in the distance is singing a work chant. Another neighbor is already yelling at a goat. A child cries, a bell rings, and a rooster decides to show up late, as usual. You are alive in imperial China, technically, and the day is just beginning. You shuffle across the cold stone courtyard, bowl still warm in your hands, and realize something that still hasn't stopped bothering you. No matter how many lifetimes you feel you've lived here, there's no bathroom. Not in the way you'd hope. You head toward the back edge of the compound, where a crooked wooden shed leans against the mud brick wall. This, my friend, is your imperial-era toilet. And yes, it's just a hole in the ground. If you're lucky, there's a ceramic pan. If you're really lucky, no one's in there already. The smell arrives before you do. It's a blend of fermentation, despair, and a little something extra you can't quite identify. There's a half-rotted fan leaning against the wall used to shoo away flies. You wave it once and instantly regret it. You crouch down carefully, hoping not to tip over the edge of the platform, and try not to breathe too deeply. There's no toilet paper, obviously. You have a handful of husks, ash, and maybe water if it hasn't frozen overnight. In winter, the seat is so cold it burns. In summer, mosquitoes line up like it's a buffet. And remember, plumbing is not a thing. It all gets collected in pots, sometimes reused for, well, you don't want to know. Now, here's something historians still argue about. Was sanitation in Imperial China actually ahead of its time, or did the widespread use of night soil, yep, human waste, as fertilizer make everything worse? Some records show carefully maintained sewage channels in cities. Others describe, well, this exact shed. After you've done your business using your body in a squat position that's admittedly great for your hips but terrible for your pride, you step outside and breathe deeply. You did it. Another victorious trip to the loo. You're a survivor. For now. Still, the day doesn't wait. You rinse your hands using water from a clay jar beside the shed. There's a bar of homemade soap floating in it, bloated and oddly pink. Some say it's made from pig, fat, and ash. Others whisper it's divine medicine, gifted by a wandering monk. You don't ask. You just rub and hope for the best. Back in the courtyard, someone yells your name. It's your uncle, holding a bucket of feed and pointing at the chicken coop. Time for animal duty. These chickens are oddly aggressive, probably because they live next to the ducks, who get all the gossip and none of the beatings. You scatter feed while muttering about how palace concubines probably don't have to deal with angry poultry. A rooster flaps its wings dramatically like it's auditioning for an opera, and you narrowly dodge a beak to the ankle. Fun fact: chickens in ancient China were sometimes used in divination rituals. Their behavior was observed for omens. So technically, your chaotic breakfast shift might also be a spiritual event. Once the animals are fed, you rinse the feeding troughs and dump out yesterday's wash water. That smell? Yeah, don't ask. The troughs are old, the wood is splintering, and there's a small frog living in one that refuses to leave. You name him Wu. While you're working, your grandmother calls from inside the house. She's pouring tea and wants you to bring her the herbs from the hanging basket. You oblige, stepping carefully beneath the eaves, dodging drying gourds and a line of underpants flapping gently in the breeze. She's sitting by the family altar, sipping tea and mumbling prayers to your ancestors. The smoke from the incense curls upward like silk in water. It's peaceful until she scolds you for forgetting to bow. You do a quick, apologetic kowtow. She hands you a small pouch, a mix of dried goji berries, licorice root, and something vaguely fishy. It's for your father's joints. He claims it helps more than any doctor, though he once swallowed a beetle thinking it was part of the remedy. In Imperial China, medicine is a fluid thing, equal parts observation, superstition, and inherited wisdom. Some herbs work, some just smell strong enough to chase away illness. And then there's always the fallback. Drink hot water and hope for harmony. Outside again, you pause to take in the sky. The sun is climbing now, burning off the mist that settled on the thatched roofs. You hear distant shouting. Vendors, laborers, the clang of tools. It's time to get ready for real work. But not before stopping at the little family shrine near the doorway, where you light a single coil of incense and whisper a tiny prayer. Something about surviving chickens and not getting scolded by the master scribe. Then you head off, feet already sore, belly only half full, brain still foggy to face the imperial world one breath at a time. You leave the courtyard house, the wooden gate creaking behind you like it's complaining. The narrow lane you walk down is still shadowed, its stone slabs slick with morning dew and bits of discarded cabbage leaves. Your hemp shoes, worn thin at the soles, slap against the stone in a rhythm that tells the neighbors exactly who's coming. Everyone knows your pace by now. That's the thing about living in a town where privacy isn't a concept, it's a luxury. Today, you're heading to work. But first, you pass the silk merchant's daughter, carefully adjusting the sleeve of her crimson robe. Her outer garment is embroidered with peonies, code for wealth and high status. She's not rich, not really, but she wants everyone to think she is. You nod politely and pretend not to notice that her hairpin is slightly crooked. In Imperial China, your clothes tell your whole life story. Literally, social class, gender, age, job, and even your moral character embroidered right into the fabric. The color yellow? Forbidden. Only the emperor can wear it. If you showed up in yellow robes, people would gasp like you slapped Confucius himself. You? You're wearing a dull blue tunic. Durable, basic, practical. Not exciting, but it gets you through the day. If you're a man, your hair is coiled into a top knot. If you're a woman, yours is knotted behind your head, possibly with a bit of ribbon if you're feeling fancy. Unless you're married, then it's a double bun. Unless you're in mourning, then it's plain. Unless, look, hair is complicated. You adjust your sash and duck beneath a wooden overhang as a laundry basket tips water out onto the street. Splash. You barely flinch. This is the 100th time. Now, here's a quirky historical tidbit. Imperial law sometimes dictated exactly how many decorative buttons, sashes, or robe layers each rank could wear. Historians still argue whether this was strict enforcement or more of a look the other way if they bribe you situation. Your shoes squelch as you walk past a group of schoolboys reciting Confucian texts out loud, syllables tumbling over each other. Their teacher naps behind them in a bamboo chair. One of the boys flubs a line and gets rapped on the knuckles with a stick. Justice is swift, sleepy, and mildly poetic. You make your way toward the fields if you're a peasant, or toward the workshop, the market, or perhaps the magistrate's office if you're part of the scribal class. Each direction promises its own brand of exhaustion. Let's say today you're a low-level clerk. You've passed the basics of the county exam, and your father bribed the right official. You now work in a dusty little records room, surrounded by bamboo scrolls tied with silk threads and enough dust to choke a dragon. Your boss is already there. He grunts at you and gestures toward a stack of tax forms that need transcribing. You bow and begin. Brush in hand, inkstone carefully moistened. Writing is slow, meditative, and painful. Each character must be perfectly formed. Mistakes aren't erased, they're burned and started over. You remember last month when Jung from 2 towns over misspelled rice tax and accidentally wrote horse corpse. He's now managing flood records in a swamp. Outside the office, you hear the beat of a gong, a traveling merchant passing through. Maybe later, if you're lucky, you'll get to browse his spices. Maybe even touch black pepper. Imagine. By midday, your wrist aches. You blow gently on a scroll to dry the ink and hope your lunch isn't just pickled mustard greens again. Meanwhile, across the city, your cousin is working at a dye shop, dipping bolts of silk into vats of indigo. Her hands are stained blue to the knuckles, her hair tied back with a strip of damp cotton. She hums softly, perhaps a tune from the puppet theatre she saw last week. That's the rhythm of life here. Everyone plays their part. You wake, dress for your rank, walk the alleys with purpose, and blend into a society so hierarchical it makes modern high school lunch tables look like anarchist communes. And heaven help you if you mix up your robes, or worse if you touch someone of higher rank. Once, a man in your town brushed against a noble's sleeve at a festival. The punishment? 30 lashes and an apology letter written in blood. Probably exaggerated. Probably. Still, you tug at your tunic, check your sash knot again, and bow a little deeper than necessary every time you pass someone who might outrank you, even if it's just the guy with the better sandals. By late afternoon, your robe is wrinkled, your sandals are dusty, and your brush hand is cramped. But hey, at least you didn't wear yellow. That's something. Your stomach growls just as the sun tips past the highest point in the sky. Time for lunch, or whatever qualifies as a midday meal in Imperial China. You gather your things, tuck your brush into your sash, and head toward the communal kitchen behind the records office. It's a smoky little shed, blackened with soot and stuffed with more steam than space. A massive wok hangs over a bed of glowing coals. An elderly cook squints at you from behind a curtain of greasy vapor and wordlessly slaps a bowl into your hands. Inside, cold millet porridge again. But this time, oh fortune of fortunes, there's a shred of pickled turnip floating in it. You whisper thanks to your ancestors and blow gently on the surface. Lunch is eaten quickly, standing up, surrounded by clerks and assistants, all pretending not to judge each other's chopstick technique. One guy slurps too loudly. Someone else spills soup on their sleeve and tries to hide it with their arm. You? You just focus on not choking. You look around. The cook is muttering to herself while slicing something gelatinous with a cleaver. Could be radish, could be jellyfish, could be both. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether the average citizen in imperial China ate well or barely scraped by. Some records praise vibrant street food scenes and bustling markets. Others, like the aching emptiness of your rice bowl, suggest that sustenance was more survival than satisfaction. Your co-worker Wang leans over and offers you a bite of something wrapped in lotus leaf. You raise an eyebrow. It's pigeon, he says. Or maybe squirrel. Either way tastes like triumph. You pass. Out in the alley, a food vendor passes by, balancing two wooden buckets on a shoulder pole. One smells like steamed buns, the other like despair. You dig into your sleeve pocket and find a single copper coin. Tempting. But you've already spent this month's allowance on boot repairs and lamp oil. And besides, even food is regulated. In cities, certain dishes are reserved for nobility punishable by fines or a beating if a commoner is caught indulging. If you're caught eating a delicacy like shark fin soup or bird's nest stew without a permit, you'll be lucky if they just confiscate your bowl. You remember hearing about a nobleman's feast once. Platters of peacock tongue, pork marinated in wine, soaked cinnamon bark, and something called 8 treasures duck, stuffed with ginseng, lotus seeds, and mystery. You try not to think about it. Instead, you sip some tepid barley tea from a cracked cup and savor the aftertaste of charcoal and resignation. Back in the office, afternoon work begins. You're slower now. Your brush slips a little more. You daydream about owning your own inkstone. Maybe with a jade lid. Maybe with a dragon carved on the side. Something elegant. Something that says, this person isn't copy-pasting tax codes all day. You're snapped back to reality by a shout. Someone spilled ink across a master scroll. Absolute silence falls. The scroll, now ruined, flutters slightly in the breeze like a wounded bird. The scribe responsible turns pale. He bows low, very low. He may be reassigned. Or worse, he might have to apologize to the magistrate's nephew. In person. The tension lingers like a cough in a quiet room, but soon the scratching of brushes resumes. As you write, you hear something curious. Music. A faint stringed melody from outside the walls. You step to the open window and spot a wandering performer, dressed in bright rags, strumming a pipa as she sings a ballad about a lonely monk and a ghost bride. You pause, transfixed. And just like that, you remember there is beauty in this world. Even if you're eating gluey porridge and transcribing grain taxes. You return to your desk, a little lighter now. The afternoon sun filters through the lattice window, casting crisscross shadows over your scroll. Time passes. You finish the last character with a tiny flourish, set the scroll to dry, and lean back with a soft sigh. Your boss walks by, inspects your work with a snort, and moves on. That's practically a compliment. The gong sounds again. End of the shift. You tuck your materials away, bow to the scroll god, a polite gesture of thanks, and head for the door. Outside, the city smells of ginger, garlic, and horse manure, a strange, oddly comforting mix. You step into the dusk, robes brushing against your legs, and head toward home. Tonight might include a warm drink, maybe even a dumpling, or maybe not. But for now, you made it through another workday without spilling ink, insulting a noble, or accidentally offending your ancestors. You're doing fine. The streets are starting to fill with the sleepy bustle of dusk. You walk slower now, not because you want to, but because your feet insist. The stone path that runs through your neighborhood has warmed from the day's sun and now radiates a low, comfortable heat beneath your sandals. To your left, a fishmonger packs up his stall. He's tossing tiny dried anchovies into a jar with one hand and swatting flies with the other. To your right, a child chases a hoop down the alley, laughing as it clatters into a laundry line. Your stomach growls again, this time louder. You wonder what's for dinner, but then quickly remind yourself not to get your hopes up. It's probably going to be fermented something, or something pretending not to be fermented. You pass a food stall selling scallion pancakes. The smell is intoxicating. You stop. The vendor glances at your sash, notes your rank, and gives a half smile. You can sniff all you want, he mutters, but sniffing's free. You nod, half amused, half offended, and keep walking. A familiar figure waves from a side lane. It's your cousin again, still stained with indigo from the dye shop. Her hair's come loose, and there's a smudge of pigment on her cheek. Busy day? She asks. You shrug. Got through 8 scrolls without bleeding from the eyes. She laughs. A rare, bright sound in a place where laughter is usually reserved for festivals and babies. Together, you head home. When you arrive at your family courtyard, the smell hits first. Steaming rice, sweet cabbage, maybe even a scrap of pork fat sizzling in the wok. Your mother, efficient as ever, ladles bowls with military precision. Your younger brother sits cross-legged, gnawing on a radish like it owes him money. You greet your father, who grunts from behind a bamboo scroll. He's been rereading the Book of Rites for the 7th time this year. He claims it brings peace. You suspect it just helps him ignore everyone. Your grandmother sits by the brazier, roasting chestnuts with tongs and humming something old and tuneless. She hands you one, and for a moment, you forget how tired you are. Here's something funny. Historians still debate whether meals in common households were eaten in silence out of respect, or if, more likely, they were full of quiet bickering and someone always spilling the soup. You're currently witnessing the latter. Your aunt yells at your cousin for talking with her mouth full. Your uncle complains the rice is undercooked. Your mother tells them both they're lucky to eat at all. You quietly crunch your chestnut and try to disappear. Once dinner is over, you help clean up. Bowls are rinsed with a splash of boiling water and stacked to dry beside the stove. You sweep again. Yes, again. There's always sweeping. It's like the dust multiplies just to spite you. With the chores done, you finally sit. A stool beside the brazier. Your legs ache. Your spine protests. But there's peace in the stillness. Someone starts boiling tea. Not the fancy kind, just dried chrysanthemum flowers and a shred of orange peel. You sip and feel warmth spread through your chest. Outside, the street is quieter now. A faint bell rings in the distance, perhaps a night watchman marking the hour. Maybe the man who yells, "Fire!" every few minutes to prove he's awake. You can't be sure. You look up at the sky. Stars blink through the smoky haze of lanterns and chimney smoke. A sliver of moon hangs low, like a fishhook dangling from the heavens. You wonder if the emperor's looking at the same moon. Then you remember the emperor has his own astrologers and probably doesn't look at the sky unless they tell him to. You glance at your fingernails stained with ink and soup and briefly consider trimming them. But you're too tired. You'll do it tomorrow. Probably. The family begins to settle in. Mats are unrolled. Lanterns are dimmed. Your grandmother gives a final cough. Your uncle snores before even lying down, and a neighborhood dog starts barking at absolutely nothing. You lie down on your mat, arms folded beneath your head. The straw pokes your scalp. A mosquito hums nearby. You sigh. You made it through another day. You didn't collapse in the fields. You didn't offend a noble. You didn't eat something cursed. In Imperial China, that's a win. You wake before the sun again, not because you want to, but because that rooster hasn't missed a shift since the day you were born. It's either that or your grandmother coughing her way through a prayer to the kitchen god. Either way, you're up. This morning feels colder. Your breath clouds in the air as you stretch under the thin blanket. Outside, someone is already chopping wood. The rhythmic thwack echoes through the courtyard like a warning. Move or freeze. You step into your sandals, still damp from yesterday's walk, and grab your hoe from its hook on the wall. Today, you're heading to the fields. It's your family's turn for irrigation duty. That means managing the flow of water through the paddy system, equal parts engineering and prayer. Rice doesn't grow itself. You head out with your brother, tools slung over your shoulder. The path winds past open ditches, buffalo pens, and a shrine that smells faintly of oranges and candle wax. When you reach the paddies, the sun is just peeking over the hills, casting everything in a soft golden glaze. It's beautiful, and wet, and sticky, and full of mosquitoes that clearly skipped dinner last night. You and your brother step into ankle-deep mud. It squelches between your toes, cold and oddly personal. You begin clearing channels, using a wooden rake to redirect the flow. Too much water? The roots rot. Too little? The rice dries up. Farmers here have been doing this for thousands of years. No pressure. You remember the story your father told you about an ancestor who accidentally flooded a neighbor's plot. The neighbor was so angry, he challenged him to a poetry duel. loser had to replant the field by hand. Your family still recites the winning couplet at New Year's, end of years, blank. Quirky, yes. But farming and poetry aren't as far apart as you'd think in imperial China. Scholars praise the balance of nature. Farmers live it. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, only to smear mud across your forehead. Your brother laughs. You tell him he looks like a soggy goose. That's basically a compliment. By midday, your back is sore, your arms ache, and your stomach is already bargaining for a dumpling. You sit beneath a tree with a bundle of cold rice cakes wrapped in lotus leaves. They're chewy, slightly sweet, and stuck together like they've formed a pact. You eat two and save the rest. While resting, you spot something odd, two officials in silk robes standing on the far hill. They're measuring something, pointing at the water channels, muttering to a clerk scribbling on bamboo slips. Tax season, your brother mutters. They're counting harvests before the planting's done. Historians still debate how efficient the land tax system was during various dynasties. Some say it was well organized. Others argue it was a bureaucratic illusion held together by bribes and fear. You, however, only know this. When the taxman comes, your harvest shrinks, whether it grew that way or not. You and your brother return to work. A small frog jumps from the mud and startles you. He's got better instincts than you do. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher. Your skin tingles from exposure. You can smell your own sweat, mingling with the rich stink of wet earth. There's something honest about it. Your brother starts humming a folk tune your mother used to sing while washing clothes. You join in, off-key but loud. It keeps the rhythm. It keeps the spirits from sinking. Later, an elderly neighbor passes by with 2 baskets of ducklings and waves. "Work faster," she jokes. "The emperor's already halfway through his breakfast, and you haven't even finished weeding." You grin and wave back with a muddy hand. As afternoon shadows stretch long, you finish the final channel and splash your face with the runoff. It's not clean water, but it's cold and refreshing, and at this point, that's more than enough. You head back home, sunburned, mud-covered, and oddly content. Farming isn't glamorous, but it's real. You pass a Confucian school on the way, where boys chant aloud from scrolls. One stumbles on a line about filial piety and gets corrected by a teacher who's clearly reciting from memory while napping. It strikes you again, this society is built on rituals, repetition, and deep grooves of tradition. You're part of it now, even if all you did today was move water and annoy frogs. You return to the courtyard, just as dinner steam rises from the wok. Your mother eyes your muddy tunic and points you toward the water bucket. You obey. You made it through the fields. And you didn't drown, burn, or get fined. Not bad for a day in imperial China. You sit cross-legged on a low stool, wringing out the last traces of muddy water from your tunic into a chipped wooden basin. Your mother hands you a slightly less filthy one, still scratchy, but dry. You thank her, and try not to wince as you slide it over your sunburned shoulders. This evening, the house feels fuller. Someone's lit an oil lamp with a wick made from old cloth. The shadows flicker across the courtyard walls, dancing like ghosts with nowhere else to be. As you settle near the brazier again, your father clears his throat and gestures toward a small wooden box beside him. Your stomach drops. The exam scrolls. He wants to quiz you. You suppress a groan and straighten your spine. If you're going to survive here with any social status, passing the civil service exam is your only hope. That, or marrying into a family who owns more than one chicken. He reads from the Analects in his slow, deliberate voice. "What did Confucius say about virtue?" he asks. You murmur the correct response, though your tongue stumbles on a character. He raises one eyebrow, disappointed, but not surprised. In imperial China, education is the passport to everything. Land, marriage, power, respect. The exams are brutal days of isolation, writing essays in tiny cells with nothing but ink, paper, and the terrifying weight of your ancestors watching. You've heard stories. Candidates who collapsed from exhaustion, who tried to cheat by sewing answers into their robes, who went mad from the pressure. Historians still argue whether the exam system promoted fairness or just created a rigid elite of memorizing machines. Your cousin joins you by the brazier, resting her head on your shoulder. "You'll pass," she whispers. "Or at least you'll look good failing." Comforting. Ish. Meanwhile, Your uncle sharpens a hoe under the lantern light, muttering about rabbits stealing turnips. Your aunt counts coins in the corner, sighing as she stacks 5 little copper discs, just enough for vinegar, but not oil. The night air carries smells from every home in the neighborhood. Dumplings, garlic chives, overcooked fish, and something unmistakably burnt. You can almost hear the shared exasperation of 10,000 mothers yelling at 10,000 clumsy sons. You glance across the courtyard to the old neighbor's house. Her door is ajar. Inside, you see her placing offerings, tiny bowls of rice, slices of pear, a pinch of salt on her family altar. She lights 3 sticks of incense, bows deeply, and murmurs names into the smoke. You're reminded of your own altar, tucked just beside your sleeping mat. Carved wooden plaques with ancestor names, 2 coins for luck, and a faded painting of a dragon that has somehow survived 3 floods and 1 tantrum. You excuse yourself and step into your small room. You kneel, light a single incense stick, and press your forehead gently to the mat. You whisper your family's names, your hopes, your apologies for forgetting to sweep the shrine yesterday. As you finish, you notice something small beside the altar, a folded paper charm, a protection spell, drawn in red ink and tied with thread. Your grandmother must have left it there. She still believes in old spirits, the kind that hide in water jars and whisper in dreams. Scholars scoff at such things, but you've seen what happens when charms are ignored. A neighbor once moved a lucky stone from his garden, and the next week, his ox got sick, his son got married to the wrong girl, and his roof caved in. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Back in the courtyard, your brother is setting up the mosquito net. Your mother tucks a few dried orange peels beneath the mat, another folk remedy. Keeps bad dreams away, or so she says. The family begins to quiet. The oil lamp gutters. Someone snores. Someone else mumbles through their dreams. You lie on your mat again, this time facing the stars. The night is clear. The Big Dipper hangs above, the same shape your grandfather once traced on your palm, whispering that it pointed the way to wisdom. You think about the exam, the mud, the fields, the scrolls, the dumplings you didn't get, the charm beside your altar. You sigh. Imperial China demands a lot, but you made it through another day, with your name intact, your sandals still mostly functional, and your eyebrows unshaved. You'll take that as a win. The next morning, the rooster doesn't even have time to crow before your grandmother is shaking your shoulder. Up. Today's market day, she says, as if that explains everything. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes. Your back aches from the straw mat. Your knees crack like an old floorboard. But market day means activity, color, noise, and if you're lucky, samples. You grab your robe and tie it tightly, tucking a small cloth pouch into your sash. It contains exactly 6 copper coins. It's all you have, and it feels both weighty and hopelessly light. You and your cousin are tasked with fetching vinegar, beans, and if prices aren't ridiculous, maybe a salted duck egg or 2. She's already outside, braiding her hair with twine, ready to haggle like her life depends on it, which, considering how dinner went last night, it kind of does. The walk to the market takes you past half the town. Everyone's awake. Men hauling water buckets, women washing radish greens, children practicing martial arts with sticks and absolutely no supervision. One child swings wildly and almost decapitates a nearby chicken. You arrive just as the stalls open. The scent hits first. Sweet steamed buns, pungent tofu, ginger, smoke, fish, and something unidentifiable that smells like ambition and regret. You dive in. Stall after stall offers wonders. Lacquered combs, bright silk ribbons, bitter medicinal herbs, roasted yams, cricket cages, paper lanterns, copper mirrors, and live frogs tied together by their ankles. Yes, frogs. For reasons best left to the seller, you stop by an old man's stall where he claims to sell imperial strength vinegar. He says it'll cure heartbreak, foot odor, and possibly bad poetry. Historians still argue whether street vendors were genuinely believed or simply tolerated for their storytelling flair. You buy a small jar, not because you believe the pitch, just because it smells better than the last jar you had. Your cousin expertly haggles with a bean seller. She flips her braid back like a whip and squints at him as if she's reading his soul. In the end, she gets twice the beans for half the price. You offer her a slow clap. She bows. Suddenly, a bell rings near the center square. People hush. You follow the crowd. A local magistrate is reading a notice aloud from a bamboo board. It's a new tax decree. Grain quotas adjusted. Silk levies increased. There's a groan that moves like a breeze through the crowd. Every time he reads, "My wallet shrinks," someone mutters. You glance at the posted law scroll. The calligraphy is pristine, elegant, fluid. Someone trained for decades to write that well. And yet, the words feel like a boot, pressing gently on your rice bowl. You and your cousin move on. There's a puppet performance underway in the shade of an old banyan tree. The puppeteer's fingers dance behind a silk screen, manipulating wooden figures of a scholar, a warrior, and a mischievous ghost. Children squeal. Adults nod along. You pause to watch. The ghost tricks the warrior into marrying a tree spirit. It's ridiculous. And somehow, it feels real. Here's a fun little footnote. Some dynasties used puppet plays as subtle propaganda tools, slipping in moral lessons and political jabs. Scholars still argue whether this was effective education or just a clever way to sneak in gossip. You grab a sticky rice cake on your way out, one coin. You eat it slowly, savoring every bite. Sweet red bean paste. You nearly cry. Then a loud crash. A goat escapes a stall and barrels into a fruit stand. Apples roll. A vendor screams. The goat charges toward a startled official, who jumps into a fish bucket. Applause. You and your cousin take this as a cue to leave. On the way home, you talk about the puppets, the taxes, the smell of the vinegar. Next time, she says, we should bring a goat. See what kind of discount we get. You laugh. It echoes down the narrow alley. A good laugh in Imperial China is worth more than vinegar, more than beans, maybe even more than a salted duck egg. Back at the courtyard, your mother raises an eyebrow at your purchases, but says nothing. Your father smells the vinegar and nods in approval. Your grandmother hides the rice cake under a bowl, pretending no one saw it. You made it through market day with all your limbs, 3 coins left, and a story about a goat. That's a solid win. You'd think your legs would get a break after a morning at the market, but no, because this afternoon is for chores. Specifically, the ones no one likes, and everyone pretends they forgot to do. You're assigned latrine duty. Again, your cousin, who clearly bribed someone, gets pickling duty, which means she gets to sit inside the kitchen, gossip with the aunties, and snack on radish ends. You, on the other hand, get to revisit the Imperial toilet zone. Armed with a bamboo ladle, a bucket, and the spiritual fortitude of a doomed monk, you head toward the family's waste pit. There's a plank that you pray doesn't snap. The odor is character building. You scoop the waste carefully into the bucket, trying not to splash. You'll be mixing this night soil with straw and ash to carry to the vegetable garden. It's disgusting. It's effective. It's farming. And it's also illegal to dump in the river, though that doesn't stop half the neighborhood. Historians still debate how sanitary this system was. Some say it was brilliant organic recycling. Others argue it contributed to outbreaks of disease that ancient medical texts described in horrifying detail, albeit using poetic metaphors. You pour the mixture at the base of the squash vines, holding your breath. Flies scatter. A toad eyes you suspiciously. The plants look grateful, or resigned. Hard to say. Back in the courtyard, you pause for water. It's warm and tastes faintly like bamboo. Still, it's wet, and that's enough. You pour some over your hands and scrub with rice husk ash. It's not perfect, but it'll do until the next festival, when everyone gets to bathe. Ah yes, bathing. You might imagine long soaks in steamy tubs, maybe flower petals and fancy oils. Reality check. You're allowed 1 bath a week, and that's generous. Your turn comes after your younger siblings. You draw water from the well, heat it over a brazier, and pour it into a wooden tub just wide enough for your knees. The water is lukewarm by the time it's ready. You strip, grit your teeth, and lower yourself in. The tub creaks. Your skin tingles. It's not pleasant, it's more like soaking in soup, made of your own exhaustion. Still, it's a rare moment of solitude. You scrub yourself with a loofah made from dried gourd. The sensation is halfway between exfoliation and punishment. You soap up using something that smells faintly of pine and regret. By the time you're done, the water is a different color, and your muscles ache in ways you didn't think possible. You towel off with a square of woven hemp, change into your clean robe, red, only moderately stained, and step out, feeling reborn. Sort of. Your grandmother nods approvingly when she sees you. You smell like a person again, she says. Just for today. Compliment received. That night, dinner is a humble stir-fry of cabbage, garlic chives, and bean curd. No meat, but the seasoning is good. You eat slowly, savoring each bite like it's palace fare. After the meal, your father calls everyone to the main room. He unrolls a painting he's been working on, a landscape in black ink. Mountains, mist, a solitary fisherman. It's surprisingly elegant. You ask when he had time to do it. Early mornings, he says, when you're too busy snoring. Touché. He explains the strokes, the symbolism. The mountains represent resilience. The fisherman is solitude. The pine tree, loyalty. Every line means something, he says. Just like your handwriting. You nod, staring at the painting, and wonder if you'll ever have time for beauty like that. Then your uncle stands up and plays a tune on a bamboo flute. A soft, meandering melody that drifts into the night like smoke. Your little brother falls asleep upright, chopsticks still in hand. Outside, crickets begin their nightly concert. The moon rises pale and round. Someone down the alley is singing a lullaby off-key. You lie back, staring up at the ceiling, and think about the smell of pine soap, the elegance of your father's painting, and the squish of mud between your toes. Life here is rough, rigid, smelly, but strangely full. You survived another bath day, another meal without meat, another turn at the latrine, and you didn't fall through the plank. That's worth celebrating. It's grooming day. Again. And in Imperial China, grooming is less about pampering and more about not offending anyone important enough to ruin your life. You wake early before even the chickens, which feels like an insult at this point. Your mother hands you a comb carved from peach wood and gestures toward the mirror shard hanging on the courtyard post. The mirror is cloudy, slightly cracked, and reflects your face with just enough clarity to make you question every decision you've ever made. You begin combing your hair, which hasn't seen a proper wash since last week's ceremonial bath. It's stiff with sweat, dust, and possibly a noodle fragment from yesterday's lunch. You wince as the comb catches a knot the size of a bean. For men, hair must be coiled into a neat top knot. For women, the options are endless and exhausting. Married? Double buns. Widowed? A single braid. Mourning? No ornament. Festival? Add silver pins. Scholars still argue whether these styles were strictly enforced or more fluid outside the capital. But either way, if you show up with the wrong style, someone will definitely say something. Your cousin appears with a shallow basin of cold water. She dips a cloth in it, then pats her face, neck, and arms gently, deliberately. The goal isn't cleanliness, it's decorum. Once you're finished taming your hair into something vaguely respectable, you take a strip of cloth soaked in powdered rice water and wipe your face. This is ancient skincare. Mildly effective, extremely sticky. Next comes the delicate matter of beards. If you're male, you're expected to grow one, but not too early and not too scruffy. An elegant beard shows wisdom. A wild one suggests banditry. Your uncle has a beard so immaculately styled that birds occasionally try to nest in it. You, however, have a few stubborn chin hairs and a prayer. You scrape them off with a bronze razor that doubles as a family heirloom and a potential tetanus delivery system. Nails? Always trimmed. Long nails are reserved for scholars or nobles people who don't touch mud, blood, or livestock. You bite yours clean, because the family clippers went missing 2 dynasties ago. Your grandmother insists on dabbing a small dot of herbal oil behind each ear. Keeps away spirits, she mutters. It smells like fermented mint and anxiety. Now comes clothing. You choose the least wrinkled of your 2 tunics. The color is dull brown, with faint remnants of a stitched border that once said, "I used to be new." You belt it with a sash dyed in tea water and hope no one inspects it too closely. Footwear? Straw sandals still damp from yesterday's rice paddies. You slide them on and hope your toes don't poke through too soon. Historians love to debate whether the lower classes truly followed all these grooming rituals. Some evidence says peasants were too busy. Others suggest they took immense pride in appearing neat, especially for festivals or temple visits. Today, you're headed to the temple, which means your grooming routine was not for nothing. Your mother tucks a joss stick into your sash and hands you a small coin for offerings. Behave, she says, and don't embarrass the ancestors. End of quote. You walk to the temple through winding lanes filled with clattering carts, barking dogs, and gossiping grandmothers. You pass a scholar in pale blue robes who glances at you with disinterest, a sign that you've succeeded in looking adequately clean and unremarkable. The temple stands on a raised platform, its red lacquered gates flanked by stone lions with chipped fangs. Incense curls from massive bronze burners. Bells chime faintly in the breeze. You step inside, bow at the threshold, and approach the altar. The air smells of sandalwood and aging prayer scrolls. You light the incense and kneel, whispering thanks, whispering hopes, whispering apologies for that thing you said last week. Then you tie a small red ribbon to the prayer tree in the courtyard. You don't know who'll see it, spirit, God, or curious pigeon, but it's tradition. On the way out, you glance at your reflection again in a polished bronze plate nailed to the temple gate. Your hair is still holding, your face isn't bleeding, your robe is only slightly askew. You look like you belong. And sometimes, in a world ruled by ceremony and symbols, that's the only thing keeping your day from going completely off the rails. You don't mean to be near the magistrate's house. Really, you don't. But the alley was crowded. A goat cart blocked your usual path, and suddenly you're here standing across from the massive red gate, guarded by two stone beasts, and a man who looks like he hasn't blinked since the last emperor. You freeze. You've heard stories about what happens to people who get too close. One man stepped over the wrong threshold and disappeared. Another insulted a bureaucrat's hat and re-emerged months later, without fingernails or so, the gossip says. You bow slightly, just in case the stone lions are watching. Then you turn to walk away and nearly trip over a lacquered wooden box being carried by a trembling servant. He gasps. You gasp. The guard stiffens. Watch yourself, the servant hisses. That's the magistrate's tea tray. You stumble back with hands raised like you've just touched a sacred scroll. Here's a reality check. In Imperial China, authority isn't just respected, it's revered, feared, and carefully choreographed. Every gesture, every phrase, every silk-threaded sleeve carries weight. And if you mess up even unintentionally, well, you might get a polite warning, or you might just vanish. Officials here are more than just administrators. They are extensions of the emperor himself. Their word, in many cases, is law. And even if they're technically wrong, well, you'd better be quiet about it. Historians still debate the real reach of these officials. Some records paint them as tireless civil servants upholding Confucian virtue. Others suggest corruption so baked in that bribes were budgeted like taxes. Either way, you're careful. You bow again before backing away, eyes downcast. You whisper a quiet apology to the tea tray. As you walk on, the air feels different, heavier, like you've passed through a storm cloud made of protocol and powdered silk. You head back toward the market, trying to clear your mind. But you can't stop thinking about the magistrate's court, the scrolls, the punishments, the rows of ink-eyed clerks watching every syllable. A friend once told you about a man punished not for a crime, but for a bad poem about the emperor's horse. He rhymed imperial with delirial, whatever that means, and was sent to a border town with wolves. You're not even sure that's true, but you also have no intention of writing poetry ever again. Still, curiosity wins. You pause at a notice board where government announcements are posted. Today's proclamation? A change in the salt quota. You sigh. More salt tax means fewer pickled vegetables and more soup that tastes like tears. You step aside as a court courier passes on horseback, robes flying, face unreadable. Behind him, two assistants carry scrolls tied with golden cord. That color? Reserved for the highest officials. Touch it, and you'd better have a last will. The court system here is as detailed as it is unforgiving. Petitions can take months to process. Appeals, years. Sometimes, people wait longer than they live. One neighbor's family is still fighting a land dispute that began 3 emperors ago. And the punishments? Let's just say the bamboo stick is the gentlest option. Public beatings are common. Stocks in the town square. Forgeries punished by branding. Theft, depending on the dynasty, You might lose a hand or a few layers of skin. There's also death by 1,000 cuts, used for the gravest crimes. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Scholars still debate whether it was more symbolic or literal. Most people stop asking after the first few details. You pass a street-side storyteller reciting a court tale, a corrupt judge who was exposed by a clever widow. The crowd claps at her wit. The storyteller smiles, then warns, "But don't try it yourself unless your ancestors have deep connections." Everyone laughs nervously. By the time you return home, your legs are tired, and your mind is full of unwelcome scenarios. You find your mother kneading dough, and your uncle adjusting a broken stool like nothing's happened. You sit quietly beside the stove and stir the coals. The warmth helps, but your hands still shake a little. Tonight, as you lie on your mat, the incense smoke curls lazily upward. You whisper a few extra words to the ancestors just in case they can reroute any attention away from you and your clumsy feet. You survived a close encounter with authority. Barely. And you didn't spill the magistrate's tea. That alone deserves a medal. The next morning brings with it a new kind of craving, not for food or comfort, but for flavor. Specifically, something that isn't millet, turnip, or saltwater cabbage. So you wander into the kitchen, hopeful, where your aunt is stirring a pot of congee that smells suspiciously bland. You peek inside. White rice, water, and... was that a sliver of something floating? You lean closer. Could be tofu, could be boiled cloth. Hard to say. You sigh, sip from your bowl, and remind yourself, food is survival, not adventure, not joy. At least, not unless you're rich. Imperial China's culinary hierarchy is as strict as its social one. Your meals? Sparse, simple, repetitive. But the palace feasts? Legend. Gold-plated platters, 12-course banquets. Sauces you can't pronounce made from animals you didn't know were edible. There's a story in your village about a provincial governor who once hosted a banquet with 128 dishes. No one remembers what any of them were, just that one included bear paw and another required 3 days of preparation and 2 live swans. Historians still debate how exaggerated these menus were. Were they truly that elaborate, or were officials just one-upping each other in an ancient game of culinary ego? Either way, the average citizen only hears about them. You? You're stirring your porridge with a chopstick and wondering how much salt is too much salt. On your way to the market that day, you pass a vendor selling pickled jellyfish. It glistens in the sun like something pulled from the deep dreams of a sea witch. You stare, you sniff, you walk away. It's 4 coins, and you still need lamp oil. But the vendor grins. "For you," he says, 2 coins, and I'll throw in some duck tongue." You pause. Duck tongue? Is that an insult or a delicacy? In Imperial China, it can be both. You consider, glance at your pouch, and decide against it. You don't have the digestive courage today. Instead, you visit your neighbor's cousin, who secretly sells forbidden snacks, foods once reserved for higher classes, but now quietly traded in alleyways. Today's contraband? Dried persimmon chips and fermented shrimp paste. You buy the former and avoid the latter. You eat a persimmon chip while walking home. It's sweet, chewy, dusty with rice flour. For a second, you feel like a prince. Then a bird poops on your sleeve. Reality returns. Your cousin is waiting when you get back. She's excited someone in the next village is selling bean-curd treasure cakes, supposedly made using an ancient recipe. You go with her, half skeptical, half starving. The vendor greets you with a bow and unwraps a bamboo parcel. Inside, sticky rice balls stuffed with sweet bean paste and a mysterious powder he claims was once reserved for palace concubines. "To keep their skin luminous," he whispers. You take one, bite, pause. It's unexpected, earthy, nutty, and possibly laced with regrets. Your cousin loves it. She buys 2 more. You smile and say nothing. Later that evening, your grandmother announces a rare treat, a stew made from a chicken that finally stopped laying eggs. You gather around the brazier as the pot bubbles. The aroma is heavenly ginger, scallion, and hope. When she lifts the lid, steam floods the room. You catch your first glimpse of meat in weeks. Not much, but enough to remind you that flavor is a thing. You get one small piece, chewy and full of bones. Still, you savor it. It tastes like festival days, like memories, like not being poor. Food is never just food here. It's status, ceremony, family, rebellion. Some dishes exist only to impress, others only to survive. You sip the broth slowly. It warms your hands, your throat, and something deeper. That night, your cousin teases you. Still thinking about that duck tongue? You smirk. Only every waking moment. You both laugh quietly, carefully. The neighbors are sleeping. The walls are thin. But for now, your stomach is full, and your heart, just slightly, feels lifted. Tomorrow, it's back to millet. But tonight, you dined like someone who almost matters. You wake the next morning to shouting, not the usual rooster complaints or your uncle barking about missing sandals. This is different. Louder, heavier, more urgent. You scramble into your robe and rush outside. A crowd has gathered near the east gate, murmuring in tight clusters. You elbow your way through, careful not to touch anyone too important looking, and finally spot the source. A man, shirt torn, hands bound behind his back, kneels in the dirt beside two guards holding bamboo canes. A small wooden placard hangs from his neck, painted in bold black characters, "Thief." The guards look bored. The man looks terrified. A third figure appears, the assistant magistrate. He raises a hand, and without preamble, the caning begins. Whack, whack, whack. The punishment is public, but the lesson is private. Don't cross the law. Don't embarrass your ancestors. Don't reach for something that doesn't belong to you, even if it's just a sack of rice. You turn away after the fifth strike, not because you're squeamish, just because you know it could have been you, or someone you love. Punishments in Imperial China are meant to stick in your memory, in your bones, in your village's whispers. Bamboo beatings for theft, branding for forgery, exile for insulting authority. And if you really offend the empire, you disappear. There's even a phrase for it, to vanish into the silence of the West. No one says it aloud, too risky. Historians still argue whether the legal system was brutally effective or effectively brutal. It depended on the dynasty, the magistrate, the bribe, and sometimes the phase of the moon. One of your friends once joked that justice in Imperial China was like tofu soup. You never knew what was in it, and sometimes it bites back. Later that day, you pass a punishment board outside the court office. Freshly posted, a list of minor infractions and their consequences. Spitting in public, 5 lashes. Lying to an elder, public apology and temple duty. Insulting an official's calligraphy, 20 lashes and a ban from bookshops. You wince. That last one feels personal. As you walk home, you can't help but think of how thin the line is between ordinary and outlaw. A spilled bucket, a mispronounced character, a moment of bad luck, that's all it takes. Back in your courtyard, your family pretends nothing happened. Your father sips tea. Your grandmother hums while shelling beans. But you all heard the same caning. You all saw the blood darken the dirt. After dinner, your uncle tells a story about his cousin who stole a rooster and ended up sweeping the temple floor in the capital for 20 years. He laughs. No one else does. That night, your cousin asks quietly, "Do you think the man will walk again?" You don't answer. You don't know. Instead, you light incense and whisper a prayer to the gods of mercy. Not just for the thief, for yourself, for everyone who walks that fine line each day and hopes not to slip. And as you lie on your mat, the memory of the bamboo stick echoes in your ears. You wrap your blanket tighter, the weight of silence heavier than the chill in the air. You made it through the day without punishment. That's not just fortune, that's survival. You wake stiff and sore, as usual, but today there's something to look forward to. It's bath rotation day, not a festival, not a feast. Just the once-a-week ritual of boiling water, scrubbing behind your ears, and pretending your tub isn't also used to pickle vegetables when water is scarce. You trudge to the communal bath area, really just a wide corner of the courtyard, behind a reed curtain with a bucket, your scrubbing cloth, and the tiniest sliver of soap. A brass kettle simmers nearby, guarded by your grandmother, like it holds the emperor's treasure. She eyes you as you approach. "Don't waste it," she mutters. "The wood cost half a jar of vinegar this week." You nod solemnly. Bath water is sacred. You pour the warm water into the tub, steam rising like a gentle ghost, and step in slowly. The heat bites at first, then seeps into your bones like apology. You close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine you're in a palace bathhouse, attendants fanning incense, lotus petals floating at your elbows. Then your elbow bumps the wood rim, a splinter stabs your toe, and the spell is broken. Back to reality. Still, you scrub thoroughly arms, neck, scalp, even under your toenails, which have become tiny ecosystems of dirt. The soap smells faintly of pine and wax. You emerge cleaner, prunier, and vaguely dignified. Your cousin goes next, humming while dumping a full ladle over her head, like she's the empress of hygiene. Historians still argue how often people bathed in imperial China. Some records show frequent washing, especially among nobles and scholars. Others suggest once a week, maybe twice, was typical for common folk, due to fuel costs and seasonal hardship. One thing's certain, when water and heat came together, it felt like magic. Back inside, your mother hands you a fresh robe, by which she means the least smoky of your two options. You comb your hair, trim your nails, and even rinse your ears with a splash of cold water. Today is your clean day. Might as well savor it. By midday, your stomach reminds you that cleanliness does not replace food. You sit by the brazier and share a bowl of noodles with your cousin. The broth is thin, the greens overboiled, but you slurp it like it's the emperor's own hot pot. You overhear your uncle complaining about his back again. He tried cupping therapy last week, glass jars heated and placed on the skin to draw out stagnant energy. It left him looking like he lost a fight with an octopus. You ask if he'll try acupuncture next. I let one person poke me with needles, and I married her, he grumbles. Laughter circles the room. Someone drops a chopstick. Someone else starts reciting a rhyme about onions and stubborn ghosts. Then your aunt brings out something rare, a basin of fragrant water with crushed mint leaves. She's making hair rinse. You lean in. Is that for? She cuts you off. Only for the baby. He has royal dandruff. You sigh. Maybe next week. Outside, the sun is soft and golden. You hang your damp robe on a line and watch it sway. A neighbor is singing again this time. A tune about a scholar who bathed once, fell in love, and never got dirty again. Total fiction. Still, it's a nice thought. That evening, your grandmother lights a bundle of mugwort and waves it around the house. Cleanses the air, she says. Wards off bugs and bad dreams. You cough, but smile. The scent is earthy and strange, like memories and medicine. You kneel at the family altar, whisper thanks for the bath, the noodles, the air that doesn't smell like manure for once. Then you lie down, warm, clean, and wrapped in a robe that doesn't itch much. The straw mat feels softer, the night quieter. Tomorrow will be full of sweat, dust, and disappointment. But tonight, you sleep like someone who might just be royalty, if only for a moment. It starts with a cough. Not yours, your little brother's. A dry, rattling wheeze that cuts through the early morning air like a cracked flute. He's curled up in the corner, clutching his thin blanket, face flushed. Your mother's already hovering, pressing her hand to his forehead, muttering curses at last week's rain. Always the rain, she says, as if the weather is personally attacking her children. You're sent to fetch the healer. Not the fancy kind from the city, but the one with the missing tooth, 7 herbal pouches, and a scroll of pulse charts she probably copied from memory. You run, dodging laundry lines, stepping over chickens, nearly colliding with a blind fortune teller who mutters something about wind energy in your spleen. You don't ask, you just keep going. The healer's house smells like 5 types of bark and boiled shoe. She's in the middle of pounding dried gecko with licorice root when you arrive. He fevered? She asks. You nod. Tongue color? She asks. You blink. I forgot to look. She sighs, stuffs several herbs into a cloth satchel, and follows you back, hobbling only slightly. When she arrives, she checks your brother's pulse, not just at the wrist, but behind his ear and along the ankle. Too much damp, she mutters, too little fire. She pulls a small lacquer box from her robe and begins mixing powder. Crushed chrysanthemum, dried ginger, something that smells like roasted shoe leather. She brews it in a clay pot and forces it down your brother's throat. He gags. Good, she says. That means it's working. Traditional Chinese medicine isn't just pills and potions. It's a philosophy. 5 elements, yin and yang, qi flowing like an invisible river through your organs. And it's serious business. Historians still argue how effective it was by modern standards. Some say it kept populations healthy for centuries. Others argue it was more about balance than biology. Either way, it's what you have. The healer lights a stick of mugwort and waves it over your brother's chest. Moxa, she says, warms the lungs. Smoke curls through the air. You try not to sneeze. Later, she pulls out her needle kit. You pale. You're doing acupuncture? She grins, revealing that missing tooth. Number you are. Your brother's eyes go wide. Yours go wider. But it turns out she's joking. She does it herself, 3 careful pricks along the arm. Your brother whimpers, then sighs. A good sign. When she's done, she wraps the needles in silk, pockets the coins your mother offers, and leaves behind a jar of bitter tea concentrate with instructions scrawled on the lid. Boil. Pray. Don't panic. That afternoon, your brother sleeps. The fever breaks. Your mother weeps quietly into a rice sack. You head outside for air and find your cousin feeding dried dates to the neighbor's goat. Want one? She asks. For the goat? Or for me? You say. She grins. You chew the date slowly, grateful for its sweetness, even as its sticky skin clings to your teeth like a tax collector. Back inside, your grandmother tells a story about a famous doctor who once revived a man using only his voice and a gourd rattle. You don't believe her, she doesn't care. That night, your brother sleeps soundly. You light incense and thank the gods of health, herbs, and missing teeth. Medicine in Imperial China is never just medicine. It's rhythm, ritual, a stubborn kind of hope. And today, hope worked. Morning sunlight slants through the wooden shutters, painting golden lines across your mat as you wake. Your little brother is snoring softly, color back in his cheeks, fever gone, breath steady. You smile, relieved, and stretch out your legs, which feel like they've been folded into a scroll for a week. But there's no time for lounging. Today is a day for negotiations. Not with officials or merchants, but something far more delicate, matchmakers. Your eldest cousin, smart, respectable, tolerably average in both looks and personality, is ready for marriage. Or, rather, your family has decided he is. In Imperial China, marriage isn't a flutter of hearts or a random love story. It's a contract, a chess move, a calculated partnership meant to balance property, family ties, and, if the stars align, a bit of personal compatibility. You shuffle into the main room, just in time to see your aunt pulling wrinkles from a red silk cloth and your uncle trying to force a smile into his face like it's a tight shoe. The matchmaker is on her way. She arrives like a breeze wrapped in perfume and secrets. Robes trimmed in crimson, jade pendants clinking, eyes sharp as ink brush tips. She bows precisely 22 degrees, then takes her seat with a rustle of silk that suggests at least 2 decades of professional mystery. Your family is honest, she says, modest, well-fed. She's being generous. She unrolls a scroll, details of potential brides, their names, family rank, birth charts, number of siblings, and yes, the exact angle of their eyebrows. Apparently, one girl's left brow slants too steeply, a sign of stubbornness or genius. Historians still debate which is preferable in a wife. She reads aloud one profile: daughter of a silversmith, slight limp, excellent at embroidery, born in the year of the ox, hour of the dragon. Your aunt nods. Your uncle whispers, limp is negotiable if the dowry includes ducks. Dowries, by the way, are a world unto themselves. The bride's family provides cloth, bedding, a comb set, and if ambitious, a pig. The groom's family counters with wine, grain, and maybe a hairpin wrapped in gold thread. It's not about money exactly. It's about face and ducks. You retreat to the edge of the room with your cousin, who looks like he might faint. You ever feel like your whole life is being auctioned off by people who think your name is that boy who didn't pass his exams? He whispers. You nod. Constantly. Outside, a neighbor beats a rug with a stick like it owes her money. You step away to fetch tea for the matchmaker, who now discusses auspicious wedding dates. The lunar calendar is consulted. A monk's opinion may be sought. Not the 15th, she warns. That's the day the goddess of doors closes her eyes. What does that mean? No one really knows. But you don't mess with door goddesses. Here's a curious tidbit. In some dynasties, even the emperor had to consult matchmakers, although his scrolls were a bit longer, and his choices usually included options like daughter of a provincial governor or niece of the moon. By midday, negotiations stall. The matchmaker sips her tea and declares she will think it over. She leaves in a flurry of silk and mystery. Your cousin collapses beside you. If I marry the silversmith's daughter, you owe me 3 dumplings, he mutters. Later that evening, your family rehashes the meeting like scholars analyzing battle strategy. The limp's not serious, your aunt says. The eyebrows worry me, says your uncle. She makes lotus root soup, your grandmother adds. Everyone falls silent. That's a rare skill. No decisions are made, but the wheels are turning. You light incense before bed and whisper to your future self. May your match be kind, may your eyebrows be symmetrical, and may your in-laws live far, far away. Marriage here is less about romance and more about alliance. If love blooms, it's a happy accident. But until then, you negotiate, you bargain, you hope. The village square is unusually lively today. There's a ripple of excitement running through the crowd. Not fear, not gossip, but something lighter. People are whispering, pointing, and smiling behind sleeves. A traveling troupe has arrived. You spot the banners, first red silk, embroidered with gold thread, fluttering dramatically even in the faintest breeze. Then the carts roll in, painted with dragons, phoenixes, and scenes of ancient battles where no one ever got muddy. You pause mid-task, yes. Your chore list remains unrelenting and dash off toward the commotion with your cousin in tow. She grabs your sleeve. Acrobats? Puppets, you say, or music. Turns out, it's all 3. The troupe begins to unpack. There's a zither player tuning delicate silk strings that gleam like sunlight on water. A man with bells on his ankles balances on a board atop a rolling barrel. A masked performer practices sword flourishes while pretending not to pose for the crowd. In Imperial China, entertainment wasn't just distraction. It was art, politics, philosophy, and also, frankly, a chance to sit down for a few minutes without being yelled at. You settle in near a shaded corner of the square, weaving between children who are already mimicking the swordplay with sticks. An old man walks by selling sesame candies shaped like birds. You stare longingly. 1 coin each. You sigh. Not today. The first act is shadow puppetry. A white screen is raised, and behind it, oil lamps cast dancing silhouettes. The puppets are made of stretched, dyed leather, painted in brilliant reds, greens, and golds that the audience can't see, but the performers insist on anyway. The story? An ancient general defends the border with the help of a talking tiger and a ghost grandmother. You've heard it before. Doesn't matter. Still brilliant. One of the puppeteers sings the dialogue in a high, nasal tone, while another provides sound effects, gongs for footsteps, whistles for wind, and, amusingly, a duck call for comic relief. Your cousin giggles. You join her. It's been a while since anything made either of you laugh like this. Next, the zither player performs a solo. His fingers pluck the strings with such speed and precision, it looks like the instrument is playing itself. The notes flow like water calm one moment, crashing the next. The song tells the story of a homesick immortal. You listen, entranced. Somewhere behind you, someone is selling steamed buns. The scent drifts through the square like temptation incarnate. A quick aside. Scholars have long debated whether these performances carried hidden messages, political satire, spiritual parables, coded rebellion. Some say the stories were subversive. Others believe they were just trying to keep bored farmers awake. After the music comes the acrobats. One man climbs a narrow pole, flips upside down, and balances a ceramic bowl on his foot. Another juggles knives while hopping on one leg. Everyone gasps. Your grandmother mutters, "That's how your uncle broke his nose in 2072. Then comes the finale. A fire eater who dances with 2 flaming torches, twirling them in arcs that draw gasps from the crowd and smoke into your eyes. He swallows the flame, belches a puff of smoke, and bows deeply. Applause breaks out, clapping, cheering, someone banging a ladle on a wooden bench. The performers pass a small woven basket through the crowd. Coins clink. A few folks toss in dried dates. One kid drops in a beetle, possibly as payment, possibly as protest. You dig into your sash and find a half coin bent, slightly green. You toss it in. On your way home, your cousin hums the zither melody and tries to mimic the sword dance with a laundry stick. She hits a tree. Everyone laughs. Even your uncle. That night, dinner tastes better. Not because the food changed, but because the day did. Your mother asks how the performance was. You describe the shadow puppets in detail. She nods, remembering when she was a child watching the same tales. Even in a rigid world of rules and rituals, there are moments like these when art arrives like a breeze, stirring everything loose. You fall asleep humming that same melody, picturing puppets dancing behind silk screens and flames swirling through dusk. In a world that often demands silence, today sang. The next morning, your cousin groans from her mat. "Tell me that wasn't real," she mutters, face buried in her sleeve. "Tell me I dreamed the fire, eating man and the duck. Call General." You laugh. You didn't dream it. But if you did, at least it was an entertaining hallucination. You sit up and wince. Your back is stiff from sleeping on the floor again. The straw in your mat seems to migrate during the night, sharp ends poking at your shoulder like tiny insults from the ancestors. Outside, clouds gather low and heavy. The air smells of river mud and anticipation. Rain is coming, maybe more than rain. And here's where the real test begins. Because life in Imperial China comes with nature's whims, fire, famine, flood like unwanted guests who show up with muddy shoes and stay the week. A bell rings faintly from the watchtower. 3 slow chimes. Flood warning. Your uncle's already tying his sleeves up. "The river's risen," he says. "We need to move the grain." You rush to the storehouse with your cousin, slogging through thickening mud, your sandals slipping with every other step. The thatched roof above the grain bin is leaking again, despite repairs. You haul sacks millet, barley, dried beans onto wooden platforms raised on bricks. Your back screams, your arms burn. One bag splits, spilling grain into the muck. Your cousin curses under her breath and tries to scoop it back with a bowl. "We can't waste this," she snaps. She's right. Not one grain. Not after last year's drought. Not when taxes come due whether the fields flood or not. You remember hearing once that in certain provinces, farmers used to hide rice in bamboo tubes sealed with wax, burying them like treasure when disaster was near. Risky business. If caught, it was called hoarding. If you got away with it, it was called surviving. Historians still debate how responsive the imperial government was to these crises. Some emperors sent relief granaries. Others sent, well, tax collectors. By mid-morning, the rain arrives. Thick sheets that slap the rooftops and turn alleys into rivers. You watch from the kitchen eaves as chickens cluck miserably under an overturned basket. Your grandmother lights incense at the family altar and prays not for riches, not for status, just for the walls to hold and the crops to stay rooted. Someone from the next courtyard shouts, "The north levee's broken." Panic ripples through the air. You and your cousin grab a woven mat and rush to help reinforce the lower gate with mud bricks and prayer. The village works like ants before a storm. Buckets, shovels, ropes, anything that might help. Even the old man with the bad leg is handing out sandbags made from rice sacks. You work until your fingers prune and your legs throb. You slip once, knee-deep into a puddle that smells like fermented cabbage and regret. By afternoon, the rain eases. The clouds break just enough for the light to pour through in long golden stripes, like the sky's way of apologizing. You head home soaked, cold, and barely upright. Your mother pulls you inside and wraps a dry cloth around your shoulders. "You stink," she says gently, "but good job." Dinner that night is watery congee and pickled mustard greens. Nothing fancy, but it tastes like a reward. You slurp it gratefully. Your uncle reports that the south fields held. The millet patch survived. A little drowned, he says, but still standing, like us. Later, you sit by the brazier, steam rising from your wet robe now draped nearby. The fire crackles. The dog snores. Outside, the river still murmurs, but softer now, like a giant breathing in its sleep. You survived a flood scare. You kept the grain dry. You didn't fall in permanently, at least. It's not always the bandits or the magistrates you fear. Sometimes, it's just the sky. And tonight, you made peace with it. The day after the rain, the air smells washed and hollow, like someone rinsed the world but forgot to dry it. Puddles sit quietly in every corner of the courtyard. Your sandals squish as you walk. The straw roof still drips in intervals, plunk, 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 into a cracked clay basin near the steps. Your cousin sneezes 4 times in a row. That's a sign, your grandmother says. Of what? You ask. She looks up at the sky and shrugs. Depends on your mood. Oh, you're sore, tired, slightly mildewed, and somehow called. Not by family, not by chores, by something quieter, something inward. You decide today you're visiting the monastery. It's a modest one, not the vast, towering temples you've heard exist in the capital, but a humble retreat on the edge of town. Grey stone walls, moss-covered tiles, prayer flags faded by sun and seasons. The path to it winds up a hill lined with ginkgo trees, their fan-shaped leaves fluttering like tiny gold hands waving in silence. As you approach the monastery gates, a bell chimes low, deep, steady, a sound that feels more like feeling than noise. Inside, a monk sweeps the courtyard, barefoot, humming tunelessly. He glances up, nods, and keeps sweeping. You bow. He says nothing. That's the greeting. The inner temple smells of incense, old paper, and dust what wisdom might smell like if bottled. Statues of bodhisattvas sit in patient poses, half smiles carved into their faces like they know the joke you'll never quite understand. You sit cross-legged on a worn mat. A gong sounds in the distance. You close your eyes. You breathe. In, out. Just that. No taxes, no laundry, no magistrates, no leaking roofs or gossiping aunts or chickens plotting their revenge. Just you and the quiet space inside your ribs. You open your eyes. The monk hands you a small cup of tea, bitter, slightly floral, steeped in a silence that doesn't require explanation. You think of the farmer who lost half his crop last year and found peace in sweeping the temple steps, the widow who came here to fold prayer papers each week, the boy who was too sick to work and ended up transcribing sutras instead. Being a monk, you've heard, isn't exactly a glamorous escape. It's cold in winter. The meals are plain. The hours long. No marriage, no children, no meat, no music, not officially anyway. But the trade-off? Peace. Sometimes, that seems like a fair deal. Historians still debate the role monasteries played in ordinary life. Were they centers of refuge and learning, or clever sanctuaries for those fleeing taxes, conscription, or heartbreak? Probably all of the above. After tea, the monk shows you a painted scroll. It's a landscape ink-wash mountains, a river that looks like it's flowing uphill, and a solitary boat with a single dot of red. You don't understand it, but something about it makes your chest ache a little. You don't need to understand, the monk says. It's the first thing he's spoken. Just notice. Later, you walk home slowly. The path still damp. The ginkgo leaves swirling around your feet. You carry the silence with you like a warm cloth wrapped around your shoulders. At dinner, no one asks where you've been. You help peel garlic. You scoop rice into bowls. You smile when your uncle complains about a cricket in the rice jar. That night, before bed, you light a stick of incense, not for the ancestors this time, but for yourself. You kneel beside your mat and whisper nothing. Just breathe. Because sometimes, the greatest resistance in a place full of struggle is stillness. There's something different in the air this morning. Not in a good way. The rooster crows twice, off-key. Your grandmother stubs her toe before sunrise and declares it an omen, and your uncle wakes up muttering, "Taxes. It's tax time again, isn't it?" He's right. A government courier arrives just after breakfast, straight-backed, silk-robed, carrying a bamboo scroll tube and a scowl sharp enough to split millet. You don't need to ask what it's about. You can already feel it in your spine. Everyone gathers in the courtyard as he reads the edict aloud. This season's levies have been adjusted. Again. Higher, of course. Every household owes grain, labor, or both. There are nods. Sighs. No one protests. Protests is something you don't do in public, unless you have a death wish or a spare village to move to. You retreat indoors while the grown-ups talk strategy, how much millet can be spared, how many days of labor your cousin can manage before her hands fall off, and whether your father's bad knee is bad enough to be exempt this year. Answer, probably not. In Imperial China, taxes are not optional. They're woven into everything: your land, your harvest, your breath. If you own an ox, it can be taxed. If you have a gate, there might be a gate tax. And if you don't have either, you pay in labor. Roadwork, ditch digging, border patrolling if you're really unlucky. Historians still debate whether the tax system was cruel or simply meticulous. Some say the imperial records were a marvel complex, centralized, and surprisingly accurate. Others point out how many families starved quietly while the capital tallied their wheat. Later, a neighbor stops by, face pale. Her son has been drafted to haul grain carts to the county seat, 7 days' journey one way. She presses a small coin into your hand. In case he needs a bowl of rice, she says. You nod, though the coin won't buy much beyond hope. You're assigned labor duty this year. No surprise. Road maintenance. You and 24 others spend 3 days widening the footpath between the village and the southern fields. You carry rocks. You shovel earth. You take orders from a man who's never held a shovel in his life. On the second day, you get a blister the size of a quail egg. Your cousin tapes it with a strip of silk torn from an old collar. There, fancy, she jokes. You don't laugh. One of your fellow workers is an old man with no teeth but plenty of opinions. He tells you about a time when tax collectors came disguised as traveling monks to catch people hiding rice in temple altars. Even Buddha couldn't help that year, he says. The final day, you collapse at the edge of the field, sweat-soaked and rice-starved. A girl from the next village passes by, balancing a basket of mushrooms on her head. She offers you one. You take it like it's a jewel. It tastes like forest and forgiveness. Back home, your family tallies what's left. The grain jars are respectable. Not great, not disastrous. Enough to keep the taxmen calm and your stomach moderately unhappy. Your mother places an extra bowl of rice at the altar that night. For the ones who didn't make it, she whispers. Your grandmother adds, and for the ones still being asked to give. That evening, as you sit near the brazier, the warm smell of toasted barley in the air, you can't help but think, taxes aren't just numbers. They're time, blood, dignity, carved from your week, your back, your sleep, sometimes even your future. But you've paid, at least for now. And you still have shoes. Well, mostly. There's a knock at the back gate, a soft one, not official, not neighborly, the kind of knock that says, I'm not supposed to be here. Your cousin answers, peeking through the slats, and opens the gate just enough to reveal a man in a faded robe and wide-brimmed straw hat pulled low over his eyes. He bows silently and slips inside. Your grandmother barely glances up. Another one, she murmurs, more to the spirits than to anyone else. He's not family, not local, and definitely not just a traveler. He's part of something hidden. A whisper passed through tea shops and alleyways. A secret group. A society not listed in the imperial records. You've heard of them. Lotus circles, white clouds, the brotherhood of ink and fire. Secret societies. They exist in the cracks of empire, where regular folk gather not to rebel, not openly, but to remember, to dream, to grumble, certainly, and sometimes to act. Historians still debate the scope of these underground networks. Some say they were just local alliances for survival. Others argue they were the pulse of resistance across dynasties. What's certain is this: they were illegal, and everywhere. The man sits quietly near the stove, warming his hands. Your uncle offers him a bowl of tea not because he has to, but because this is how the world works when no one's watching. Later, he unrolls a cloth bundle. Inside, hand-copied pamphlets, poems that don't praise the emperor, fables where peasants outwit greedy landlords, warnings about rising salt taxes. One even has a drawing of the emperor's nose shaped like a turnip. You stifle a laugh. That one's dangerous. Your cousin leans close and reads a passage aloud quietly, reverently. It's not just ink. It's a statement. Maybe even a lifeline. By nightfall, the man is gone. No name given, no coin exchanged. Just a nod, and the gate closes softly behind him. You don't speak of it again. Not directly, but something lingers. A new tension. Not fear, more like awareness. like you're seeing under the surface now. You notice others too. A merchant who always arrives late, selling candles with coded labels. A potter who hums songs that rhyme with band slogans. A scholar who pretends to sell brush pens but carries hidden messages in their hollow handles. It's all subtle, quiet, untraceable, but real. Even in the heart of imperial rule, with all its structure and silence, something moves in the shadows. Something old, resilient, and stubbornly human. You ask your uncle later whether he worries. Every day, he says, but I'd worry more if no one ever knocked at the gate. You lie awake that night, staring at the rafters, listening for footsteps that never come. It's not revolution, not yet. It's resistance in lowercase, gentle, persistent, waiting. You realize that in imperial China, survival isn't always obedience. Sometimes, it's quiet rebellion disguised as hospitality, or poetry, or letting someone warm their hands near your fire. And sometimes, it's just keeping the gate slightly open. The next day, as you make your usual rounds sweeping the courtyard, tossing feed to a rooster that still hates you, you spot something unusual. A stranger. Tall, cloaked, with skin the color of sun-weathered tea leaves and hair curled in tight waves. He's standing at the edge of the market, speaking to the spice vendor in broken Mandarin, gesturing toward a jar of dried cardamom. People watch from a distance, pretending not to. Children whisper behind sleeves. A grandmother tugs her grandchild closer. Your cousin blinks, then leans in. He's not from anywhere near here. She's right. He's a foreigner, and that, in imperial China, is not something you see every day. You inch closer, pretending to browse pickled vegetables while eavesdropping. His accent is strange. His robe is odd, stitched differently, dyed in unfamiliar tones, and yet not unwelcome. Just unfamiliar. Historians tell us that despite the empire's long-held belief in its own centrality, the Middle Kingdom foreigners have always passed through. Arabs, Persians, Indians, Central Asians, even occasional Europeans with scrolls full of incorrect characters. Some were welcomed, others watched warily. All were stared at. The stranger finally manages to buy the spice. He bows clumsily and moves on. You follow, subtly, until he stops at a stall of paper and ink. He picks up a brush, smiles, and tries to write a character badly. The vendor corrects him gently. The man laughs, a big, round laugh that ripples across the street like a dropped pebble. You smile. You don't know why. Later, you hear whispers. He's a merchant from the South Seas, or a scholar sent by a foreign prince, or a magician searching for immortal mushrooms. Depends on who you ask. What you do know is this: he didn't flinch when the magistrate's guards walked by. He didn't bow too deeply. He didn't rush to explain himself. That kind of confidence is either brave or dangerous. Your grandmother grumbles about outsiders bringing strange illnesses. Your cousin, ever the romantic, wonders if he's here to find a lost Chinese bride. You roll your eyes. That evening, he comes to the tea house, sits quietly, listens to the zither, orders chrysanthemum tea, and tips with a small round coin no one recognizes. The tea master pockets it anyway. Some brave souls talk to him. He nods, smiles, says little. But when asked where he's from, he replies simply, far, but also near. Your uncle scoffs. Cryptic, typical foreigner. But you can't stop thinking about that moment, the way he looked at the scrolls in the calligraphy shop like they were magic spells. Like he was trying to read the soul of the empire through strokes of ink. You begin to wonder, what does your world look like to someone seeing it for the first time? The rice fields, the crowded alleys, the temple bells, the constant rules. Does it look strange? Or beautiful? Or like a cage made of silk? That night, you lie awake, wondering where he sleeps. Whether he's afraid. Whether he understands how precarious a misstep here can be. And also, whether you'd ever leave, if you could. Because even in a place with history stretching back like a dragon's tail, curiosity remains. The need to know more. To go beyond. To imagine what lies outside the Great Wall. And maybe, just maybe, who you'd be out there. The palace is far away. You'll probably never see it. Most people in your village won't, but its presence stretches here, like the scent of incense, long after the smoke has vanished. You catch whispers from traveling merchants, rumors from old soldiers, and the occasional wild tale from an uncle who definitely embellishes his stories. Still, everyone knows what goes on at court affects even the ones scraping millet into bowls halfway across the province. So when the topic of eunuchs comes up, as it does today while your aunt plucks chickens with more aggression than usual, you listen. They say the chief eunuch controls the flow of messages to the emperor, she mutters. No one sees the emperor, they see him. Your cousin adds, he's richer than most governors, and meaner than a snake in vinegar. Your uncle nods. He once had a poet exiled for comparing his voice to a goose. You don't ask if it's true. Probably not. Maybe yes. Doesn't matter. In imperial China, the truth has always been flexible around power. Eunuchs, men castrated, often as boys, to serve in the inner court, hold an uneasy place in the empire. Trusted by the emperor, hated by officials, feared by commoners. They are everywhere in the palace, managing treasury accounts, overseeing secret correspondence, whispering into the ears of concubines and commanders alike. And yet they have no lineage, no legacy, no family beyond the court. Their power is immense, but always borrowed. Historians still debate their role. Were they corrupt parasites draining the state, or indispensable administrators keeping the gears of empire from grinding to dust? Likely both, and neither. Later that afternoon, you overhear an elder speaking about a time, years ago, when a eunuch passed through your region collecting tribute for a new temple. He rode in a sedan chair with gold tassels. The man says, and he didn't touch the ground for 3 straight days. Your cousin snorts. I bet he didn't even know how to tie his own shoes. Your grandmother swats her gently. Doesn't matter. He could have had our house burned down just by sneezing in the wrong direction. Oh, you wonder what it must be like living in the Forbidden City, wrapped in silk, surrounded by polished floors and whispered politics, yet forever barred from the 2 things most people cling to, family and freedom. Even in the court, danger is constant. A misplaced word can end a career. A jealous official can poison a rumor, and a single mistake, real or imagined, can send you to a lonely exile with nothing but regret for company. One story tells of a eunuch who rose to great power, only to be betrayed by his own guards, who dragged him to a lotus pond and vanished him beneath its surface. Some say his ghost still circles the imperial walls, barefoot, silent, looking for someone who remembers his name. That night, your brother asks, would you be a eunuch if it meant living in a palace? You hesitate. The bathwater's warm. The roof isn't leaking for once. There's sweet potato in the rice. You look at him and say, Number, I like my name too much. Because that's what it comes down to. Power, titles, silk robes. None of it means much if no one remembers who you are when the whispers stop. You lie in bed later, thinking of that silent world behind red palace walls, of men with no children, no past, just scrolls and secrets in the ear of the emperor. You reach for your blanket, worn but yours, and pull it over your shoulders. Let someone else whisper into power. You'll take sleep and anonymity for tonight. There's a chill in the air this morning, one that settles deep in your bones and reminds you that time moves, even when you try not to notice. Today, your grandfather's bones will be visited. Not his actual remains, those rest beneath the earth in the ancestral plot at the edge of the village, but his spirit tablets. His name carved in red ink on a smooth piece of wood, waiting patiently on the family altar. It's the annual ancestor offering day, and your household, like countless others across the empire, is preparing for the ritual. You wake early to help. Your cousin is already slicing fruit with a precision you usually reserve for military strategy. Pears, persimmons, dried plums all stacked in symmetrical towers on lacquered plates. Meanwhile, your grandmother polishes the incense holder with a cloth older than you. Your job? Prepare the rice cakes. They're sticky, sweet, absurdly hard to stir, and somehow always end up clinging to your fingers, your sleeves, and, once, your ear. Your uncle says that if you drop one, it's a bad omen. You drop one. No one sees. You mentally promise to sweep the courtyard extra clean later. By mid-morning, the altar is ready, candles lit, incense smoke curling upward like whispered questions, offerings arranged like a banquet for invisible royalty. You bow 3 times, deep, slow, not because someone's watching, but because it feels like someone is. Then the prayers begin. Each ancestor's name is read aloud out of order, of course, because the list was recopied last year by someone who didn't wear their glasses. Still, the rhythm remains steady. You're not sure what you believe, whether your grandfather actually watches from the clouds, or if the act itself is the meaning. Historians still debate the function of ancestral rites, spiritual connection, social glue, or both. You think maybe they're just necessary, like breathing but for memory. After the prayers, your family sits quietly. No loud voices, no sweeping. You're meant to give the spirits time to eat. Your cousin jokes, maybe if we're really quiet, they'll leave some rice cakes. Your grandmother glares. You don't laugh. Not on Ancestor Day. Once the incense burns halfway, your uncle gathers the offerings. The rice cakes go back into the kitchen. The fruit is sliced and passed around. We eat what they leave behind, your aunt says, and they always leave enough. You chew a sticky bite of glutinous rice and wonder if your future grandchildren will say your name out loud someday, or if you'll be just another brushstroke on a wooden plaque gathering dust in a corner no one sweeps. Later that afternoon, your neighbor invites you to their ancestor ceremony. You bring a small packet of dried jujubes, humble but thoughtful. Their altar includes a painting of a great-grandmother who supposedly once told off a magistrate and got away with it. She threatened to haunt him, someone whispers, and his chickens all went bald. You admire the painting, the stern gaze, the embroidered collar, the way her portrait seems to size you up and dismiss you in the same breath. You bow to her too. That night, your family gathers around the brazier, sharing stories about those who came before. The great-great-uncle who claimed he invented tofu, the ancestor who tried to ride a goose across a river, the aunt who once ran a tea house with a secret poetry club. Some of it's probably made up, doesn't matter. The fire crackles. The air smells of incense and ginger. You look around at your family bickering, yawning, humming old songs and realize that even in this moment, you're becoming someone's story. Someday, someone will light incense for you. Maybe forget how to pronounce your name. Maybe get the dates wrong. Maybe drop a rice cake in your honor. But still, they'll remember. And that's enough. The moon is full tonight. Not just full bright. So bright, in fact, that shadows stretch across the courtyard like they're trying to escape their owners. Your grandmother calls it a storyteller's moon. Your cousin just calls it too bright to sleep. Everyone's gathered outside after dinner, drawn by the cool breeze and the silver light. The chores are done, the stove is quiet, and for once, the chickens have stopped screaming at absolutely nothing. Someone starts telling tales. That's how these nights always begin. Your uncle leans forward, his hands wrapped around a teacup, and begins recounting the time he saw a fox spirit in the woods near the riverbank. Her eyes glowed like coals, he says. She offered me rice dumplings and asked if I wanted to forget my name. You raise an eyebrow. Did you? Of course not, he replies. The dumplings were cold. The children giggle. Your grandmother rolls her eyes. It was probably a hungry widow with a lantern, she mutters. Still, you know the empire is filled with such tales. Fox spirits, river dragons, mountains that whisper secrets. And sometimes, just sometimes, people vanish without a trace, only to return years later, speaking strange languages and wearing cloaks stitched with stars. In Imperial China, these stories aren't just entertainment, they're maps, ways to explain what can't be written in an edict or carved in stone. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect ancient fears or veiled resistance to the weight of bureaucracy. Some say they were cautionary, others say they were subversive. You just know they make the night feel alive. Your cousin shares a story next about a village that insulted a thunder god and woke up roofless. Your little brother offers one about a scholar who sneezed so hard he turned into a frog. No one believes him, but the image is excellent. You lie back on the mat, hands behind your head, gazing up at the stars. The night smells of sweetgrass, smoke, and something else quiet. Not silence. Silence is empty. Quiet is full. It hums beneath your skin like a zither string waiting to be plucked. You think about everything. The mornings hauling water before the drum tower tolls. The ink stains that never quite wash out. The times you bowed too shallow. The nights when rice was thin and the soup was thinner. The prayers whispered into incense smoke. The tiny moments, warm tea, moonlight, laughter threaded like pearls between the rough cloth of your days. You've lived the rhythm of Imperial China, not the Golden Scroll version, but the one etched into calloused hands and aching backs. A life measured in footsteps, rituals, glances, and the quiet understanding that survival is its own kind of victory. A wind brushes your cheek. The paper lanterns sway gently. Someone begins to snore. Someone else, softly, starts to hum a lullaby older than any dynasty. The moon overhead doesn't blink. It watches, always. You close your eyes and let the night fold around you. The world is vast, and your place in it is small but real. And maybe that's enough. Because even in a land of emperors, eunuchs, floods, taxes, ancestors, ghosts, scholars, and fox spirits, you're still here, and you made it through another day. The courtyard is hushed now. Everyone has drifted indoors, and the lanterns have been snuffed out, one by one. Even the chickens have gone silent finally, and the soft coals of the brazier are no more than glowing embers in the dark. You lie still. The stars above blink faintly, diffused by mist curling along the rooftops. The air smells faintly of spent incense and warm stone. You listen to the creaking of old wood settling in the beams, the occasional sigh of the wind nudging through the leaves, and your own breath slow, quiet, anchored. In, out, in, out. The weight of the day slips off your shoulders. No scrolls to copy, no buckets to carry, no one asking questions. The palace is far. The magistrates are asleep. Even the gods seem to be resting. You are safe here. You think of the ginkgo trees, the murmuring river, the moon's patient watch. You think of meals shared, chores endured, stories told beneath the stars. The quiet strength it takes to rise, day after day, in a world woven with ceremony and rule. You've learned to listen, to wait, to breathe. And tonight, that is enough. Let the world spin, as it always has, heavy with ritual and time. You're wrapped in its rhythm now. And so you rest, not as a prince, not as a rebel, not even as a name on a tablet, but as you, still, warm, home,